Welcome back. In this video, we are going to get our own game mode so that we can set our default pawns, etc., and have that available to us for any future modifications. And we'll hopefully get our character some basic movement going, and and yeah, we'll see where we go from there. And thanks for being here. So let's first start with creating a base class for our game mode. So we'll go to the content browser, into our classes, and into the public section here. And we're going to right click and say new C++ class. I'm going to go into all classes, and I'm going to look for, and just going to make sure what I'm getting the right one here. Game mode, not game mode, but game mode base. And we're going to select next. And I'm going to put that in a subfolder of game so that it matches up with when we create our blueprints for it as well. And I'm going to call it HFX game mode base. I don't remember if I had underscores in there or not. I don't need them. Let me cancel this. I'm going to go with a character. Okay, no underscores or something. Good. Let's do that again. Hard part is always sometimes is staying consistent, right? Game mode base. Next. Gonna put it in a game folder. And it's gonna be called HFX game mode base. And we will create the class. Riveting, isn't it? Okay. And we're going to say no to that. And we're going to do one step at a time. Right, I'm gonna click save all because we're paranoid, and we close that one down. And I come back into Visual Studio. We reload all, and we're here with our game mode base. And actually, don't want to do anything with it. We're good with it just as a default base class at this point. And so we're going to save all of this, and we are going to build. Now, this is my first build for the day, so sometimes that one takes the longest just because it has to load a bunch of stuff into memory, I guess, for all the different portions of the code. I don't know. Um, so I'm going to pause the video just to let that happen. Okay, so that took 104 or 5 seconds. So that's good. So let's restart the editor. We're going to set that to be um, our default one. We'll start that up. And we'll go into our content browser, and we're going to make a blueprint out of that. Here it is, just so that we have an easy place to make the changes. And so we're going to create a blueprint class based on this game mode base. And we're going to call it BP underscore fine And we're going to put it in our blueprints game directory. And we create. Okay, so now we've got it here, and now we'll be able to set what our default pawns and all that kind of good stuff. Um, yeah, so like we can set our BP hero characters are going to be our default pawn. And when we get our player controller set, we'll create that then. So we can compile and save that. And so if we went back to our map, we go to our world settings, our game mode override, and here we can take our blueprint of our game mode base. And we've now got our BP hero character as our default. And so, in theory, if I push play, I should spawn in as one of those. And there we are. We can't move, can't do anything, but we're there. And that's great. Another class that I'm going to start or create at this point that we're not going to use for until we start getting into the gameplay um, ability system is an our input component. We're using enhanced input. I'm going to use enhanced input. Um, but with the gameplay tags, we're going to want to modify that a bit. So we're going to create our own. And again, it's going to basically start off as a basically going to be just a clean subclass of the enhanced input component. So in public here, we'll create a new class. Go to all classes. And we're going to go for enhanced input component. This one right there. And we're going to go next. And I'm going to put that one in an input directory. And it's going to be called HFX, enhanced input component. Let's just go HFX input component. Let's shorten up the words a little bit here. We're getting a little bit long. And that's fine. And let's create, let's create the class. And that's good. We're not going to do that. We're going to save all. Exit this. We're going to come back here. We're going to reload all. And here's our input component. We're not going to make any changes to it at all, but it inherits from the enhanced input component. And we will rebuild here. This should take only a few seconds this time, in theory. Yeah, because when we're going to be using this, we're going to be starting to respond to gameplay tags for input and for other things. So that's where this is going to come into play. Um, but until then, we're just going to just have it ready for us. So that's good. And let's save that and let's start our editor. Okay. I can close out of the game mode base for now. I go into, so now we want to be able to use that input component. We're going to go into our project settings. We're going to go down to engine and input. And just going to remove some of this stuff and scrolling down to the default classes. So our default input component class is going to be our new HFX input component. And the input class can still be this, but we're going to be using this component. And these settings basically get saved right away. As long as this note up here says is that it's writable. If you're using version control, sometimes you have to check that out first to make sure that it is writable. Okay, so now we can go back to our workshop. I don't think there's anything else that we need to change or adjust here. And we still won't be able to do anything, but if we push play, we get here and we didn't crash, so that's all good. Perfect. So the next step on our path, let me just close out of a couple of other things here that I've got open. So the next thing that we're going to do is our player controller. And that's when we're actually going to start to do something. So in our content browser, again, we're going to go into our public folder of our classes. And we are going to create a new C++ class. I'm going to go to all classes and I'm going to go player controller. And I want a player controller. And I'm going to say next. And I'm going to put that one in a folder called player. And it's going to be HFX player controller. And we're going to create that class. I'm going to say no. I'm going to save all. I'm going to close out of here. Come back here. I'm going to reload all. Okay. And I got this guy. Got a lot of things open here, which I don't need open. So I'm just going to close them. Little tip, middle mouse button and just on the tab itself, hovering over the tab itself, you can close the tab. So that's pretty cool. I'll leave some of these open because I'll probably go back to them, but we'll just work on the player controller now. As I'm building this, just so that you're wondering why sometimes they take a little bit longer, I've got a bit more developed uh, class that I'm going through that started from the courses I've been taking, mostly from that gas top-down course from Stephen there. And I should have started this particular task of creating my own starter template earlier on because I'm trying to work through the various components of it here, and it's a little more advanced in the view that I'm looking at. But anyways, we'll get there. So to start this off, we're going to need, I guess, our starting setup here. So we want a public section. I want a protected section, and I want a private. I always capitalize a private section. And then I'm going to make a public section at the bottom, although I don't know if I'm going to need it right away. And this is for getters and setters. And there's probably a place where I can edit this template, but I don't know where that is yet. One day. First thing in our public section is we're going to need a constructor. So we want well, we want this really. Copy that and paste it there. And doobly doos. So that'll be the first thing we want. So we can implement that. Let's create the definition for it. The only thing I'm going to add here right now is to maintain our replication for multiplayer, because the gas system is inherently multiplayer, and so is the movement component. So it solves a lot of problems. But not all. But one thing that we do want it is this to be B replicates equal to be true. So that's one thing that we want to set here. And so that's good. Go back here. Okay. So the next thing that we've got is um, we're going to override begin play. So that we'll put in the protected section. And it's a virtual void begin play override. Okay. And because what we want to do in here is we want to get our um, uh, input component set up. So first thing that we're going to call from here is super on begin play. Okay. And now we want to create a subsystem. Mm, yeah, we'll start that. So so in here we want to get our attached to the player subsystem, and so that we can create and attach a mapping context. So we'll start with it's a U enhanced input local player subsystem. Pointer, we'll call it subsystem. And it doesn't like us right now because it's not defined. And so we're going to include that here. We're going to include the enhanced input subsystems.h. I think that should get to here. So we'll just continue on for a minute. So this equals a U local player get subsystem of type U enhanced input local player subsystem. It found it this time, so it's must be it'll catch up over there, or I spelled something wrong. Yep, sub system. There we go. And it wants it wants a player, so we want to give it a get local player. Okay. Now that can be null, so we want to protect it for that. So we're going to say if subsystem. So if it's not null, then we can do stuff. So here we're going to add our mapping context, which we'll define in the editor. So here we'll do subsystem, and we'll access add mapping context. And now here it wants a mapping context, which we don't have one defined here yet, so we'll have to do that. So let's do that. Let's go into our .h file, and we'll create a private variable. And it's going to be a T object pointer. and it's going to be of a U input mapping context, and we're going to call that well, let's call it HFX context. I don't like that. HFX, I like it to be mapping context. Here we can use longer words because we're not in a big long path theme of anything right now. And it seems to be okay with that, so that's good. We didn't need to forward declare that, although I think we're going to have to, but we'll see what it does. And so now here in the controller, we want to make sure that that mapping context is actually valid before we do anything with it. So I'll right off the top, let's do a, we're going to assert that the context has been set on character. So let's do a check, and we're going to check HFX mapping context. Okay, so we'll get an absolute crash if this fails, which is what we'd want because it's kind of important. So we're going to add mapping context, and we're going to add HFX mapping context, and it wants a priority. So we're going to give it the 0 priority just to set it as the active one. And you can have other ones come into play later on. You can give them different priorities so that they can overlap and do stuff, but we're keeping it simple right now. Okay, so I think that's all we need to do right now here. So we've got our subsystem. We've mapped a context to it, which we'll set in game. We'll create them and set them in game, so that's fine. The next thing that we're going to need in here is an action to do to coincide with our input action, WASD, which is what we're going to set up. So what I want to have is a move action. Oh, one thing I forgot here. This needs to be a U property, and it needs to be a U property, and we want it to be edit anywhere, and we'll put it in the category of input, because otherwise we wouldn't be able to access that in the editor, that is. So similarly, I'm going to copy this line, and just below here, we're going to create a T object pointer for our U input action. And I'm going to call this one move action. Okay. So that's again going to be something that we're going to set in the editor. But now in C++ here, we are going to bind it, but we need to override another function here in our .h. So we're going to go .h. We're going to go into our protected section, and after begin play, we're going to do a virtual void and set up input component override. and I'm going to spell virtual correctly. And so we can implement this. Okay, oops. And in here, first things first, we're going to call super. Let it do whatever it wanted to do. Uh, is it? I spelled that correct. Maybe it's. Oh, it's an incomplete class, more than likely. So it's because I don't have a. I have to do an include up here. Um, and here we're going to include our um, our input component that we did. So that was in input, and it was called. Let me just go to the side here. Yeah, input. Pretty sure this is what the one it wants. Yeah, hfx input component dot h. I think that's what it wants. It might just be slow in its waking. Sometimes IntelliSense and doesn't work very well for the super command. So I'm going to just continue here. When we do a compile, it'll give us a better idea whether we got all the pieces that we need. Okay, so we're going to go with a UHFX input component pointer. Called it, and we'll call it HFX input component. We're going to cast the input component of the player to this type of components. We're going to do a cast checked because we want it to work. We don't want it to fail. We want it to crash if it doesn't. And we're going to do cast check to our UHFX input component. And I'm going to cast the input component to that. That's from the player, right? Component that handles input for this actor if input is enabled, right? Okay, so that's what we got. So now we want to bind our move action. So let's do that. We're going to do hfx input component bind action. We're going to bind our move action, right? And the event that we're going to want to bind is our e-trigger event. We want it to be on triggered. So in other words, as soon as we push like W, as we're pushing W, we're starting to do the W direction or SAD. We're not interested in just when it started or completed, just when it's triggered. Triggered is an ongoing event. So we want it triggered, and then we need to pass in an object for this that it's listening to, which is this. I think I'm a little bit leery on that, but this is where we want to come in from, and then our function name. Well, we haven't defined a function yet, so let's go and do that. Come back here. So we're going to define, we're going to go back to H, and we are going to go into our private section here, and we're going to make a void function called move, and we're going to put in a constant f input action value reference to, and we'll call it input action value. Okay, and then we'll implement this, or define it, I should say. So there's our move function. So that means up here, the best thing to do is just get the full qualification of it. There is a this class kind of thing, but this never breaks. And so that will bind our move action to our move function here. And that's all we need to do there. And now in our move function, what do we want to be able to do? Well, this input action value is going to give us, when we set it up, it's going to give us a 2D vector, or a 2D vector value. And so we want to use that to add movement to our controlled pawn. So what we're going to do is we're going to create a constant f vector 2D input axis vector. And we're going to say give that from our input action value, input action value. And we're going to use the get of type f vector 2D. The enhanced input component, that input action value can be a Boolean, a 2D vector, a 3D vector. It can be lots of different things. So we need to basically say what type that we're expecting to get from it for this, and we're going to get that. And so if I'm just going to do this a little bit in a building kind of way. So we're going to first of all start off with getting our controlled pawn. And so it's going to be an A pawn, and we'll call it controlled pawn. And we're going to say that's equal to get pawn of type A pawn. Okay. So if that's valid, if we can get a valid pawn back from so the player controller has a function called get pawn, so it gets who it's on basically, and then so we have the controlled pawn now, and now we can do controlled pawn, and then we want to add movement input, and we want to add since we're getting a 2D vector, we're going to have a forward direction and a right direction. And those forward directions or right directions can be positive or negative. So like we get forward or backward and left and right. And then the combination of both of them will give us all of the angles in between. So we're going to get our forward direction. Except I haven't defined our forward direction. Right. Okay. So I kind of buggered that a little bit. We're going to add a movement. I'm going to do this over. What does it want here? It needs a world direction. Okay, so Up here, we're going to do a const f vector. I'm going to call it forward direction. And now here's where a point where you need to make sure you're matching up what we're going to create in the editor to what we're expecting in here. So the x-axis is basically considered the forward direction, right? So we're going to get the forward direction of f rotation matrix. Ah, let me do one more. So this needs a yaw rotation, which we don't have yet. So we're I'm sorry, this is fun. We got a constant f vector. We got the input axis vector, constant f rotator rotation equals to get control rotation. So now we have an input axis vector. We have a rotation, and we're going to get a constant f rotator yaw rotation. And that is going to be 0 on what's that in pitch, and we're going to use the rotation dot yaw for yaw, and then we're going to do 0 on roll. So we just want to get kind of the 2D representation of it. We're not rolling or pitching up and down. We're just turning in plane, right? So then our forward direction, we're going to use our yaw rotation. And from that yaw rotation, we are going to get the unit axis, unit axes, I, not ES, just the one, unit axis, and we want the E axis X. Okay. So that will give us our x-axis component of the yaw rotation, and we're going to take that x-axis component of that as our forward direction. Similarly, we're going to do the right direction. So f vector right direction equals f rotation matrix of our yaw rotation, and get unit axis is is, and this will be for the y. Okay. So now on our controlled pawn, when we add movement, right? So you just put that back up. It wants a world direction, so we're going to add our forward direction. And we're going to use our input axis vector as the magnitude. We're going to use the dot. I'm going to put dot y. I like it to be dot x, but we're going to do dot y. I'm just following my other template that I've got going here because it doesn't make sense to me. And then we're going to add our right direction. And we're going to use our right direction In fact, I'm gonna, let's see where it goes. Oh, I got some goofy typing over here. Okay. So forward direction, I believe, should be X. Forward direction input axis vector should be, in my mind, forward should be X. I'm gonna mess this up. And the right should be Y. Let's see where we end up. I'm believing things could be things that they are. Not like failing in a live recording. Okay, what else do we got to do? I think that's all we have to do to have movement working other than defining it in editor. So we'll go there. So let's see if we can get a good compile out of this. Find out all of the includes that we've missed. There's going to be a one or two, I'm sure. Yep. So this is good because um, there's lots of conversations or comments that come up in the courses in the discords and stuff like that of, oh, I tried to do this and no, this I get all these errors. What should I do? And well, go and find what you missed. So here's our input mapping context. It says it's an undeclared variable. We're in our controller.h, and so that basically means it doesn't know what this thing is. And so let's, since we're in a .h file, and we don't want to create circular dependencies, we'll just forward declare our u input mapping context. Okay. And you know what? Then you solve one error and then do it again. Rebuild it, like especially when it only takes a few seconds, and then see what's the next one. So u input action doesn't know what that one is. So give us a class u input action. Okay, and save that and build. Okay, what do we got next? Missing type specifier int assumed. Um, move input action. So it doesn't know what f input action is. So let's go up here. Class f. Oh, it's a struct. Sorry. F input action value. Okay. And we'll save that. Pare that down a little bit further. Okay, we're getting closer. What do we got? Non-standard syntax use ampersand to create a pointer to member. Oh, what did I forget here? Setting up our input component. Got our pointer there. Oh yeah, right. This needs to be the reference to that function. Okay, let's try it again. And we got success. How about that? See, and still that still doesn't know what to do with that, but apparently it's okay. So let's run our editor up. Okay, now there's some things that we need to set up here. First of all, let's go into our blueprints and input. And we are going to, I'm going to make a subfolder in here and I'm going to call it actions. And inside here, I'm going to do a new blueprint, all classes, input action. Oh no, cancel this. I go down into input action. So I'm going to call this one input action, IA underscore um, move. Okay, we'll open that one up. And so its value type is going to be an axis 2D, so 2D vector. And it's going to have a trigger. No, not a trigger. It needs, I think that's all we do. That's all we do here. We save that and then we go back. No, 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 yeah, no, yeah, I think that's all we'd have to do here. And then we go back to here and we go up to our input. And so you don't do this very often. You do it once at the beginning of a project and then you forget about it after a while. So here's our mapping context. So I'm going to call it mapping context MC, and I'm going to call it um, default mm, input. Going to open that. So now we're going to create a mapping, and it's going to be for IA move. And we're going to have um, and we're going to have WASD, so there's going to be 4 of them. So running forward in a game is pushing the W key. So I'm going to click this and push W. So this is my forward. And I'm going to push this one for S for backwards. We have to do some other settings yet, but let's just get these in. And then running to the right is going to be D, and running to the left is going to be A. So this is where it comes down to is it X or Y, right? So W to me is forward direction. Forward direction is the X direction in the character. And I can be proven wrong so many different ways here. It's probably not even funny. Um, yeah. And so modifiers. Pretty sure X is going to be first. So I can get rid of this one. I don't think this one needs any modifiers. S is going to be needing the negate, so it's going to be the opposite. D is going to swizzle the input axis. And if we open that up a little bit, so in other words, it's going to take and move the Y value to the front, right? And so Y is going to be the right axis. And then here for A, we're going to need to swizzle. And then we're going to add another one, and then we're going to negate. So that should be running to the left. Pretty sure that makes sense to me. I'm pretty sure it makes sense to me. Um, and I'm going to re-record this if this is hopelessly wrong. Okay, so now that we've got that set up, we can go back to our content browser, and we're going to, oh, we don't even have our player controller set yet. So we need to do that. We should have our player controller class here. So if I create a blueprint based on that and go into blueprint, player controller, and I'm going to call this BP underscore HFX player control. Let's just, I think I'm just going to call it HFX. I'm just going to call it player controller. Oh, I'll leave it in. And I'll create that blueprint. Okay, this is awesome. Look at this. We got our mapping context input that we need. So we can put our default mapping context. Our move action that we created is IA move. And there's a bunch of other settings in here that we get to play with later. But I think that's all that we need here. We can compile and save that. We can go back to our content browser, or to our yeah, let's go back to our content browser, go into our game mode, get our blueprint game mode up. Our player controller class is now going to be BP HFX player controller. We have our hero character. And I think that's all that we need to make this work. So let's try it. Let's push play. And I'm pushing S and I'm running backwards. I'm pushing W, I'm moving forward. And I'm running to the left, and I'm running to the left, and I'm running to the right. And that's A, this is D, this is forward, this is backwards. And if I push W and D at the same time, I run up to the side. So that feels pretty good. Awesome. Something that we can do, I think it's a tilde, and it's like show debug enhanced input. So we can see that, um, and on the side there, you can see W going to be true as I push W, and it gives us a count on the amount of time that's been triggered. Same with it's not highlighted in the bright yellow or in the bright white there, but D, I'm pushing D, and it's true, and we're running this way. Pushing A is true that way. S is true this way. So that's great. So we can see that it's all working. Um, and that's awesome. Fantastic. I think with that, that was a long video. I apologize for some of the hiccups and things in there, but it worked out and made a lot of sense to me as we set up the X and Y directions and everything. Um, and it doesn't matter as far as those go. You can switch them. You can switch those X's and Y's, but you just have to be consistent between the two systems. So again, just important to recall, and and um, and then to remember as you add stuff in the future. Uh, Anyways, thanks a lot. Let's look back at our list just before we end off here. So what did we do today? We did our game mode. We created a basic input component. We got our player controller started. We haven't gone into player state. We did get our enhanced input for movement in place, so that's great. We're not into gas yet. We haven't done anything with our UI. We haven't done anything with our character outlining when over the enemies. I think that would be a fun thing to always have available on a template. Um, I did add a subfolder for input actions. I updated this already before as I was planning it out. And I say too much, I'm sorry. And so, yeah, so next time we'll see what we get into. Probably creating the player state, because that's important to have the gas system in place and to be consistent across death of your character, and also helps for replication, if I understand that correctly. So we'll get into maybe doing this outlining over enemy character when we mouse over them, and which will mean that we'll create some interfaces and a few other things. So that'll be great. So thank you, and have yourself a great day. Cheers.